Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the One Smart World Academy. Today, I'm going to be talking about the most important strategy of structure information. So, what does structure mean? So, this is a strategy that you need to use when you want to organize information or data or people or resources and processes in meaningful and systematic ways. This is a core strategy used to bring some sort of systematic order and meaning to information. And it brings order and organization to every task. So this is one of the cool yellow strategies. And we all, if you're looking at your 40i right now, we all have different levels of preference for this one. And I think it's really important with this one to understand where we all are. So you might be living or working with somebody who has a different preference from you in this one. If you're really high in it and you really think having structure in life is really important, and you're with somebody else who has a low preference for this one, they don't really think that it's all that important. Please remember that we are all different. And in our research, we have found that sometimes people who tend to be higher in green are lower in structure. So the emphasis with people high in green is loving ideas, and sometimes organizing and structuring ideas is not the fun part. Having the ideas and just sort of freewheeling and having ideas come out is fun, and organizing those isn't necessarily important. So that's a little bit of a trend that we see. And when you're trying to understand new subjects or learn a new skill, or you're in a new situation, all the information can feel overwhelming, and adding structure is really the only way through. So regardless of if you love to have structure in your life, if you're learning something, you're at school, we're all learning all the time. And really the only way to be able to assimilate a whole bunch of information is to add some sort of structure to it. So here we are. These are the yellow strategies. So it's one of the first three, which we call cool strategies. So it's often used with scanning, which is gathering lots of information. Structuring is the one we're talking about. And then clarifying would be asking questions just to make sure that you're understanding the information. So I do find that this is one of the ones that can really cause conflict. So if you're working with somebody who is different than you, again, it's helpful if you can be very understanding of that. And I think we have such an emphasis in our culture that we all need to be really organized, and we need to be very planful. And if your desk is messy, then you're not thinking straight. But having a preference for structure is different than being able to structure. So it's very helpful when you're feeling overwhelmed or confused. If you've got large amounts of information you're trying to get into your brain, if you're at the beginning of a new situation and you need to get organized, you need to figure out, where am I? What are my next steps? What am I doing? Or you have to manage and access growing quantities of information. So this is actually a picture of my desk. So I actually have a low preference for structure. I don't love it. And I think, so I love flowers. I love growing flowers, and I love just the fun of looking at pictures of flowers, of looking at catalogs online. These are just a few of the print things that I have. I also have all sorts of bookmarks and things in Pinterest that I just love looking at. And I spend the winter months looking at pictures of flowers. So this looks like a disorganized mess. But you know what? If you asked me where anything was, I would be able to tell you. But it's a challenge when it comes time to try to make sense of all this information. So although I love looking at these pictures and I love gathering lots of information, in terms of being able to make a decision or make sense of it, this lack of structure is not a helpful thing. So in order to be able to put structure into things, it's helpful if you can develop some sort of categories. So if you're, reading notes for a test, or whatever task you're doing, if you can organize things into any sort of category that makes sense. So for example, the least to most important, like what's most relevant to what you're doing. Maybe it's, you're researching to purchase something. So if you can organize least to most expensive, that might help you to make your decision. You can organize by subject. You can organize things, let's say something's age is important or size is important. Being able to see, okay, these things fit into this category, and you don't have to be high in structure to be able to recognize that, but setting up some sort of buckets, if you like, to be able to put the stuff into is a really good first step in adding structure. So here's just a fun example. So building your skills. So just for fun, choose something you want to organize and list 5 different ways that it could be organized, clustered, or categorized. For example, your clothes. So if your closet is a mess, your bedroom floor is a mess, start by, choosing what's a category that makes sense for you. Is it the color, season? What's your favorite? What fits you right now? If you're going to hang it or fold it, how are you going to store it? Might be helpful ways to start structuring the information, which is actually clothing in this case. So here I've categorized all that same mess that was on the desk is now categorized into 3 headings. So it's learning resources, catalogs, and inspiration. So it starts to give me a little bit more easy access to what it is I'm looking for. And sometimes you need some tools to be able to do this. So things like Post-it notes, highlighters, index cards, if they're bigger things, file folders, binders, shelving, whatever it is you're organizing, label makers. And of course, on our computers, there's all sorts of files that you can create a lot more easily than you can create physically. But this is just a physical representation of some ways that you might be able to organize things so you can find them again. So we talked a little bit about what it looks like if you're low in structure. That would mean, it's hard for you to find the structure. It may be hard for you to, if somebody were to come along and help you structure it, you might not like to keep it that way. The other end of the spectrum would be if somebody's overusing structure. So it can be seen as being a little bit rigid. You might be seen to be slowing down the process to make time to always be organized. Like everything has to be organized before you can do anything. You're too rigid in what needs to be done before moving forward. You need to talk about it. You need to, make sense of it in your head. It can also be seen to be you're not allowing for other people's creativity if you're sort of forcing a structure on things. If you're making the system and categories more important than the people, people can't give you new ideas because, it doesn't fit into the structure of how your brain works. So new creative ideas can't really fit. Or it could be seen to be overusing it if you're sort of overriding common sense just because you need to adhere to a system. So I do find that people who are really high in structure do often have systems for things. So for instance, you come home at the end of the day and you have a bit of a routine for where you put your shoes and your books and your purse or backpack or knapsack or briefcase, whatever you have, just so you can find it again. So somebody high in structure would have a really great system and they would always stick to it. Somebody lower in structure, may not have figured out a system. They might constantly be losing things. So having, routines, and once you figure them out, being able to stick to them also can be very helpful in being able to get out the door the next day. If you also apply one of our other strategies, which is CRUX, which is, what really is important here. So for all those resources that I showed you, that I categorized, I really only have a certain amount of room in my garden for a certain amount of flowers. So when I get to the CRUX, I just really like this picture. So I'm going to grow, I think it's like 6 different types of seeds to be able to create this bouquet. So I got to the crux is, what do you actually have space for? What do you have resources for? What are you actually able to do? But the fact that I had structured it and organized it and organized my thoughts allowed me to be able to get to the crux, which is the decision part. So scanning and structuring aren't really making the decision, but they're helping you to be able to get to your final decision. Without structure, I would not have got to the crux here. So the more information available, the more important it is to structure it so you can find, access, and understand it easily. So I hope that's been helpful. So please be kind to each other and forgiving if you're working with somebody who might be the opposite extreme to you and your preference for structure. And as with all of the thinking strategies, we know that you can develop them. So if you don't like to use it and you're low, hopefully there's been a couple of ideas here for how you might categorize your stuff so you can find it better. And if you really, really like to use structure, lessening your preference and allowing a little bit more room for, what happens in the moment or other people's creativity can also help you and help us all to get along a little bit better too. So thank you very much for listening, and good luck with structuring your information. Bye for now.